The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, CaneSport. It's June the 6th, 2023. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined today by our whole team. Matt Shodell, our managing editor in Square number 1, Stephen Wagner and Azubi Charles, our two young guns in Squares 3 and 4, and we are going to discuss the news of the day. No, in fact, I'll tell you today what we're going to do. We're going to do something a little different on the show. We are going to create the news of the day because we decided to kind of undertake a little bit of an exercise and try to make ourselves think through exactly what is going to happen in the 2023 football season and make predictions on that subject. And so we're going to talk about it a little bit on this show. Matt, I'll start with you. You were the most enthusiastic about this exercise because you think you know absolutely everything. So this is a very small challenge for you to look 2, 3, 4 months into the future and prognosticate what the Miami Hurricanes are going to look like, what games they're going to win, what their final record is going to be. So go ahead, talk to us.
I was as excited to do this exercise as I would have been to watch you eat chicken wings off the floor at Hooters. That's how excited I was, which, you know, for me, that's actually fairly excited. In this case, the exercise that we were assigned, I feel like we're back in school, was to go game by game and predict if Miami wins or loses each game. And you guys can see it all on the front page and all that stuff. And I actually think Steven did the best job because Steven's the only one who really went like off the deep end. You know, like in the movies, it's like the asteroid's going to hit Earth. No one believes him, you know, and then the asteroid hits Earth. But in this case, it's real life. And, you know, Steven, the asteroid in real life doesn't hit Earth. But I kudos to Steven for saying that Miami loses to Georgia Tech and beats Florida State and loses to Louisville. I mean, who does that? Who has the gumption to do something that crazy? You know, I'm calling him Asteroid Man. He's the guy in the movies. Maybe he knows something we don't. Maybe he built the time machine before I did. I have not got it perfected yet. But, you know, for me, I sort of tried to stay true to reality, unlike Steven. And I'm going with 7-5 record. You know, the team was 5-7 last year. I don't think it's a stretch to imagine they'll be 7-5, and I'm not going to predict that they're going to lose to a really bad Georgia Tech team. I'm not going to predict they're going to beat an FSU team that most people think is top 5 or top 10 in the country and has one of the top quarterbacks in the nation. You know, could they lose to Louisville? That's possible, sure. You know, that's a toss up for me. But my 7-5 is you know, it's maybe a little bit different than how other people perceive it. I don't know. I mean, I think that, let me see what I said here. So basically, to me, there's 6 games that are gimmies. And, you know, last year, obviously, there were 6 games that you probably could say were gimmies too, and they didn't win them all. But to me, I don't see how any in year 2 of Mario Cristobal will be an abject failure of monumental proportions if they lose to any of these teams I'm about to say. Miami, Ohio, Bethune-Cookman, Georgia Tech, sorry, Steven, Virginia, Temple, and Boston College are all just bad teams. They're all sub-500 teams. In year 2 of Mario Cristobal trying to get the roster right, 2 recruiting classes in, 23 transfers, that actually more than that, 25, whatever it is, plus transfers he's taken over the 2 years that he and his staff and Alonzo Highsmith have felt are good enough to help this team win games. It would be an abject failure to not win those 6 games. It would be disastrous to not win those 6 games. So you're already 6-0 in my prediction with those 6 games. However, I predict them to go 1-5 against the rest of the schedule, because the rest of the schedule is really, to me, pretty top tier teams. You know, they got a tough schedule, you know. So the game that I think they can win is probably Louisville. I think NC State's going to be a little tough because the NC State defense is really, I think people underestimate. You know, people always say Clemson, Florida State this year. NC State's defense could be, if not the best in the ACC, one of the top 3 for sure, maybe the second best. I mean, they've got a defense that I was looking at it earlier today. I think they're top 25 from last year in like 6 or 7 different categories on defense. They got a lot of talent back. So it's a difficult schedule. I don't see the Texas A&M game. I know it would be nice, and I honestly almost said they're going to beat Texas A&M, except all the people who are my fans on YouTube verse would have been so upset if I predicted Texas A&M and a win for Miami over Texas A&M. They would have called me a hypocrite. Said I was losing my mind basically, because you know me, I'm the Debbie Downer. So I'm going with 7-5, and if any of you three have questions for me, great. If not, move on, and I can enjoy the rest of my evening.
Well, I mean, I'll get into my thoughts in a minute after Steven and Zuby go, but Vegas has set the over/under at 7.5, and I felt like that was pretty spot on. Like you're saying 7-5, I'm going to be saying 8-4. Zuby's saying 9-3. But I think we're all kind of like in the right ballpark. Steven, I can't remember what you're.
9 wins for Steven.
7 wins for Steven.
Oh yeah, 7 wins. Oh, 9 wins for Zuby. 9 wins for Zuby.
Zuby said 9.
Steven's got the weird 7 wins, right? That's what it was.
Wacky 7 wins, but I have a logic to it.
So Matt and Steven both are coming in at 7. I'm coming in at 8. Zuby's coming in at 9. We're all kind of in the same ballpark. But the variable is going to be what is going to determine games. And Zuby, let's go to you because you think everything is going to go right, and this team's going to win 9 games, and that means that they are going to win the close ones because there's going to be 5 or 6 of these games that go down to the wire. And my whole thing is when you don't have elite impact players, which I think they're trying to develop some, but they don't have a ton of them right now. Those games are win some, lose some, and you can almost like flip a coin. You're going to win one, you're going to lose one, win one, lose one. Or in the case of last year, you're going to lose them all. Zuby, you think everything is going to go great. So let's go to you to get everybody in a really good mood before they get to Debbie Downer, Steven over there to your right, I guess, on the screen. Why are the Hurricanes going to win 9 games?
Yeah, so like Matt would say, I'm Mr. Optimistic, and I really do think, Miami can turn things around in year 2. I kind of put this in, my part. I said, hey, who would have predicted last year Miami went 5-7 and got blown out by Middle Tennessee State at home? I don't think anyone had that on their bingo card. Who's to say Miami can't win 9 games this year, kind of shock everyone, in a positive way. But my biggest thing in all seriousness was I believe if Miami can win those first 4 games and obviously beat Georgia Tech in the first ACC game, obviously Bethune-Cookman, Miami of Ohio, Temple, and obviously Texas A&M, which I think is going to be the biggest game of the season for them, momentum-wise, to kind of carry them through that ACC schedule. And that's what I kind of based, my prediction on. I started with Miami, Ohio win, Bethune-Cookman win, Texas A&M. I think that's, like I said, the base game on schedule. If they win that one, I think they kind of cruise through it until they get to North Carolina. I don't think they can beat North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And another thing that I'm really kind of basing my 9 wins off of is Tyler Van Dyke. This is his 3rd year in Miami. He's a seasoned quarterback. Obviously, he dealt with injuries last year, but we saw what he can do when he's healthy. And that's my biggest thing. And that's why I picked them to beat North Carolina State on the road again. Obviously, North Carolina was really successful. Matt, you mentioned their defense, but kind of their guy pushing the team was Devin Leary. He's no longer there. His 2 years there, I think he was 17-4 as a starter. They have Armstrong for Virginia. We saw what he did versus Miami last year. Not saying it's going to be the same result or the same Armstrong, but I think in a QB battle, obviously, defense wins championships. But I feel like in that situation, Tyler Van Dyke can power Miami to win on the road, kind of be his big win at Miami versus NC State. I do think they lose to Clemson. I just think Cade Klubnik is going to have a crazy year with Garrett Riley. We saw what he did at TCU with Max Duggins, I believe. And now with Cade, his sophomore, I think this is his big, breakout year. And obviously FSU returned everyone to their team. I really, as much as people don't like hearing, I don't see that game going too hot unless, some miracle happens. But then I do think they go on to beat Boston College, and I think they go on to beat Louisville, who does not have their quarterback as well, which is kind of the biggest thing that I'm basing on. NC State quarterback situation is kind of in the air. Virginia, obviously, they're going to beat them. Well, can't say obviously because they lost to Middle Tennessee State last year. But Louisville as well, losing Cunningham, who was their guy for the last 3 or 4 years, I believe, or however long he was in college football. So my biggest variable for this year is Tyler Van Dyke, and I think he can and will power this team to 9 wins. He doesn't have the Heisman expectations coming in. Everyone doesn't think he's going to be the savior. Miami's going to be so great under Tyler Van Dyke. Low expectations, high results. That's what I'm going with.
The people I talk to who are able to see the workouts and things like that are glowing with Tyler Van Dyke's mastery of the Shannon Dawson offense. And they think he's going to put up really, really, really big numbers this season. By the way, it's not a given that Tyler Van Dyke is leaving after one more year, just to throw that out there. If he has a monster year this year and can get in the first couple rounds of the draft, then he obviously will go. But it's not a given. But he is likely to do really, really well in this offense. He's getting it and doing extremely, extremely quality work on the practice field in the team's off-season workouts. So that would be supportive.
Yeah, I love your long-term memory lapses, Gary. That's great.
What are you talking about?
They said the same thing about Tyler Van Dyke and Josh Gaddis's offense a year ago. So, like, you know, I'm a believe it when I see it guy. However, I am changing my prediction. After listening to Azubi, I'm going with 12-0. I don't know why Azubi stopped at 9 wins. It makes no sense. Hearing him talk, why is he stopping at 9 wins? Go all the way, Azubi. 12-0.
He's talking about losing to Clemson and Florida State.
He doesn't seem like he actually believes it. He's saying it, but I don't see that he actually believes it. He seems to believe it with the 9 wins. The 3 losses, he seems like, it could be either way. It's tough to tell.
I think those are going to be. I think the North Carolina one is going to be close. I think Clemson and Florida State won't be as close.
Yeah. What's not even close? 4 points? 3 points?
Two scores maybe.
Oh, really? Wow. What happened to you, Azubi? I'm rubbing off on you.
I'm being honest. I think North Carolina, the last 2 times they played really close games, I feel like it's going to be like this, this time around again. And then
you're so negative, Azubi. You're so
another road game. When you go on the road, it gets tougher, no doubt. All right, Stephen, Mr. Debbie Downer.
Well, that's our show today, everybody. Tune in tomorrow for the next episode of Good Morning CaneSport.
To Miami of Ohio this year, Stephen?
You're going to let Stephen talk? This is a travesty.
All right. So I'm going to reference Matt's point here.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
So, yeah, you look at the schedule. There are 6 gimme games. 100% agree with that. Like absolutely games.
No, you don't. You picked one of the gimmies as a loss.
Hey, let me finish, for God's sakes.
You said you agreed with.
Let me finish, Matt. Let me finish.
No.
There are 6 gimme games. There are 6 games that Miami 100% should win. But when was the last time that you really looked at your team and you looked at the schedule? I'm talking end of the year when hindsight's 2020. You looked at the schedule and you said, yeah, these were 6 games they 100% should win. And how many times does your team actually go 6-0? I mean, going back to last year, there were 6 gimme games. Miami ends up going 5-7. Even going back to 2017, the fantastic year under Mark Richt, they lose at the end of the year at Pittsburgh and play really, really poorly in that game too. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Miami's not at the point like Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, those big boys, where they can really afford to play very poorly or just not up to the standard. But the talent gap is just so wide that it really doesn't matter, and you're able to steamroll these opponents anyway. I mean, I thought to myself in 2019, there was no way that, even a horrible Georgia Tech team then was going to come into Miami and win, even whenever Miami was really in the middle of, kind of a so-so first year under Manny Diaz. I really thought there was no way they'd be able to pull that off, and they did. So, yeah, there are 6 gimme games on the schedule, but I think that it is really, really unlikely that Miami ends up going 6-0 in those games just because of the proven history. There's a lot of, there's a lot of things that can go wrong over the course of 6 games, and people don't realize how hard it is to win 6 games, even if you're just not playing that good of competition. Now, I will say, on the other hand, one of the reasons that I did pick them to beat Texas A&M is I think Tyler Van Dyke is better than Connor Wigman. So I give Miami the win there. I think otherwise the rosters are fairly similar. I don't think Texas A&M is really, is as good as Vegas thinks that they're going to be. I think Tyler Van Dyke is the difference maker there. And then Florida State. I know that people are going to say, well, how the heck can you pick Miami to lose to horrible Georgia Tech and then beat Florida State. Well, first off, I don't see this season coming without some sort of a really disappointing gut punch. I don't. Miami's not at the point where they're a 10-win team yet. I think that comes next season in 2024, not in 2023. And there's going to be a bad loss. There just is. But that being said, because there's also going to be a bad loss, I do think that that Mario Cristobal is going to get his signature win this season. It's not going to be a season where Miami fans, talk about, the U is finally back. But I do think that this is a culture establishing season. And one of the big key marks of establishing a good culture is having one of those positive wins that you can point to in the locker room to remind your guys, hey, we did go into this tough environment. We did pull this thing off, and to be able to point to recruits and say, look at what we can do whenever we're firing on all cylinders. And I think that's going to come at Florida State. I think that Florida State is a little too overly dependent on Jordan Travis. I do not doubt at all for a second that Florida State has a lot of talent on the roster this year and that they are going to be, in my opinion, a top 15 team. But I looked at them last year. I watched, quite a few of their games, and I thought to myself, it kind of makes me a little bit uncomfortable how much they rely on Jordan Travis's spectacular play. And I started thinking to myself, if Jordan Travis really isn't great, like if he's anything short of great, this is a Florida State team that could be in a little bit of trouble. I mean, Florida State was in trouble for a little while against Florida at the end of the year, a Florida team that ended up with a losing record. They played a bunch of close games early in the season, close games that previously they were losing, but last year they won. And so I think that the amount of success that Florida State had last season, right now, I think it's a little bit closer to being just kind of a blip on the radar as opposed to really, really regular good success that FSU fans are kind of used to. So I see Miami going into a rivalry game, Mario Cristobal understanding how huge this game is and being really, really pissed off about getting absolutely shellacked and embarrassed at home last season. I see Miami putting together, a game plan that they've been constructing for months at this point. I see Shannon Dawson putting together, the most brilliant opening drive script that anyone has ever seen in the history of football. And I see Miami making everyone go, what the hell just happened in Tallahassee? So I do have the Hurricanes beating Florida State. Miami gets their signature win. Clemson and North Carolina, both losses. Miami doesn't have the roster to compete with them right now. Then Louisville, I am going with the close loss just because I do think that right now that's a really, really evenly talented matchup. But I could see Miami's youth causing them some problems in some really close games.
All right. Hey, can I respond to that one?
Come at me, Matt.
Yeah, I don't need to speak. Go ahead.
All right, perfect. So look, the bottom line, Steven, and this is just the truth. I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm a truth teller.
Okay, then I'll tell you my truth.
Perfect. But let me finish before you tell me your truth.
Okay.
Okay, so you're like a conspiracy theorist. You're Stephen Anon. You're not QAnon. You're Stephen Anon. You just see things that aren't there because you happen to know that upsets happen every year, and you're just trying to pick from a dartboard what they're going to be. So I'm going to translate for you what you actually said. Hi, I'm Stephen Wagner. I'm scared to pick this team to go 5-7 again, so I'm going to pick them beating Florida State and Texas A&M with losses to Louisville, Georgia Tech, and NC State. If you lose to Louisville, Georgia Tech, and NC State, you're going 5-7, bro. You were too scared to say they're going 5-7. Just say it. Say it out loud. That's your truth, Stephen Anon. They're going 5-7. Stephen Wagner. That's your quote.
Okay, first off, if you keep calling me Stephen Anon, I'm going to have the FBI investigating me, so that's definitely going to be an issue. Secondly, first of all, I don't think Florida State is nearly as good as everyone says and thinks that they're going to be. I think
that's why you're Stephen Anon.
I think they're going to have a decent amount of success at the start of the year, and then I think they're going to be a really big disappointment. But you're telling me that Miami is going to go the entire year not have an upset. They're going to win all of the games that they're supposed to win, and whenever they lose, it's going to be because the other team had more talent or the other team had better coaching.
Let me refer to you. You said early in your manifesto that when's the last time Miami lost to the teams that they were supposed to lose to and beat the teams they were supposed to win against? It was 2 years ago. They were an average team. They won, I think, 6 games. They lost to Alabama. They beat App State. They lost to a pretty good Michigan State team. They beat Central Connecticut State. They lost to a Virginia team that won 6 games. They lost to an average North Carolina team. They beat NC State. They beat Pittsburgh. They beat Georgia Tech. They lost to Florida State. They beat Virginia Tech. They beat Duke. That was pretty much like what you expect from an average Miami team. Last year, they were a little below average, and the Central Connecticut State game was a one-off. But the truth is, if you believe in real things, like Miami was not a team that was any good last year. So, Stephen, you're basing a lot of your crazy picks on the fact that you still apparently think Miami was good last year and just somehow lost bad games. Good teams beat good teams. Bad teams lose to bad teams. Miami was a bad team last year. You think they're going to be a bad team again this year, but you think Florida State's going to be bad too. You think, whatever's going to be bad too. And but that's not reality, okay? Every expert right now in the world knows that Jordan Travis is not going to be bad all of a sudden. They know that
I'm not saying he's going to be bad, but I'm saying that I think it's possible that this team is too overly dependent on him. If he's not great, you've got to go.
I don't disagree with you, but if Florida State's not good, they're going to win 9 games. Okay, Miami at its best this year is going to win 7 or 8 games. They're probably not going to win 9 games. So you're somehow equating Miami being way better and Florida State being way worse to all of a sudden Miami's better than Florida State.
I'm saying the gap isn't nearly as big between Miami and Florida State as a lot of people think it is.
As it looked I think last year when they just pummeled Miami at the line of scrimmage. Yeah, I'm with Stephen on that a little bit.
I don't think that it's near.
So Gary's flipping his pick now to Miami beating Florida State too.
I said 8-4. I'm going to get to my.
You guys are such homers. Like you don't even see.
No, I'm going to get to my.
I'm a homer. I'm saying they will lose at home to Georgia Tech, and I'm a homer.
Why is Miami all of a sudden so good that they can play with a Florida State team that's not going to live up to its expectations? That's what I'm asking.
Bad teams can have good games. Correct. You can go in and have one good game. The better team does not win. The team that plays better wins.
An 8-win team is not a bad team. That's above average.
So Stephen Anon and Gary Anon are saying Miami's going to go in and play an amazing game against Florida State. Florida State's going to have their worst game of the year, and we're going to win. Somehow traveling to the future and having seen that, because I live in the real world where we look at actual numbers and actual data points and make decisions based off that, not just saying something out of nothing. You can't. There's no number that will back up what the two of you are saying. Miami's already an underdog by, I think, 16.5 points in that game. Like, I don't understand what the two you were talking about.
Gary Anon jump in here. That is not what I'm saying, Matt. Gary Anon is saying, and I'm going to elaborate on this now, that this team is back to where it was under Al Golden, okay? Win some, lose some. Not a ton of elite talent, some good talent. But when you're in win some, lose some, it is almost impossible to sit there and pull up the schedule and say, win this one, lose that one, win, lose, because almost every game is going to be a coin flip. It is almost every game that they play in the ACC and against Texas A&M is going to be a 50-50 situation. Clemson probably still is far ahead of them. On paper, Florida State is far ahead of them because of the experience coming back. But I am with Stephen on the Florida State subject. I think the Noles are way overhyped. I think they will screw up at least 3 times next season. Maybe one of them's against Miami. Maybe it's not. I certainly can't predict that. But here's the thing. I think that nobody really understood what Mario Cristobal inherited and how bad it had become. And it was way worse than any of us really. We knew it was bad. We knew the coaching change had to take place. We knew Manny Diaz was in over his head. We did not realize the degree to which the talent evaluation had totally fallen off the planet, okay? And Mario comes in last year, and they simply did not have a lot of good football players in the program, okay? And you've seen them run out 40, 50 guys since that took place. And Matt gets upset about overuse of the transfer portal. I don't think Mario wants to use the transfer portal as much as he does. I think he has to right now because he is trying to sequentially build respectability of the program. That means they won 5 in year 1. They got to win 7 or 8 in year 2, try to get up to 9, 10 in year 3. And by 2025, in the Mario Cristobal master plan, I would bet you, if he shared it, which he doesn't, but I would bet you in his master plan, he is hoping that by 2025, they can compete with anybody in the country. And that's what they are trying to get done. But you can't just win 5 games every year. And that's why, as I've been trying to explain to Matt 100 times, and I don't want to set him off and go, let me talk, please. Don't interrupt me.
And don't mention me.
I don't want to set him off and get him off on his whole tangent about how much he hates the transfer portal and how much he thinks that every transfer they take is handicapping them for the future. I don't want to get off on that tangent here. But I think that, yes, they are desperately trying to go from 5 to 7 or 8 this year at least. And, to get to the 9 that Azubi's talking about, they're going to need some breaks. But they are going to be in a lot of 50-50 games. I would be surprised if there's not more than 1 or 2 games this season that they are not still in going into the fourth quarter because the team is improved. They may have 8, 9, 10 guys drafted next year. I don't think they're going to be at the top of the first round necessarily, but just getting 8, 9, 10 guys drafted in next year's NFL draft would be a massive step forward for this program from where it's been for the past several years. So when I looked at this thing, I based on the fact that, you have your gimme games. Steven says 6, maybe it's 5, but the rest are going to be win some, lose some, win some, lose some. So if you're playing, 6 to 8, win some, lose some, you win some, you lose some, you're finishing 8-4. Maybe if you get all the breaks, you're at Azubi's 9-3. And that's the way I see this season going. I think they're going to put up huge numbers on offense. I think it's going to be exciting for the fans. Not going to win every game, but I think everyone's going to have a lot of fun watching this team. They still don't have a number 1 receiver, but they are better at receiver than they were a year ago. Tight ends, probably somewhat comparable. I mean, McCormick's mostly a blocker, but he's a good one. Arroyo's looking very, very good in the offseason workouts. And a guy that I would not sleep on at all is everyone's looking for Jaleel Skinner to bust out. Don't sleep on Riley Williams, man. He's looking really, really good from everything I'm hearing. And I think he can contribute this year. The running back position, I'm hearing phenomenal things about Mark Fletcher in the offseason workouts. He is going to make a contribution in year 1. The question right now is how big of a contribution. He has to get tougher. He has to acclimate to the college game. But you just look at him, and he is a different looking type of football player. He'll make an impact. And so now you put him with Parrish and Chaney. There's a hope that by midseason, maybe Citizen can even make a contribution. So, you're serviceable at running back. You don't have an elite guy. There's nobody there that's going to be at the top of the first round. But you do have some pieces for Shannon Dawson to work with here. And on the offensive line, they feel like they are building perhaps what will be in a year or two the best offensive line in the history of Miami football. That's how excited they are about the young kids that they signed this year. And everyone's thinking about Samson Okinola and Francis Mayagoa. Yes, they are going to be great. Don't sleep on guys like Tommy Kinsler. I was talking to somebody the other day about Tommy Kinsler, and they think his potential is through the ceiling. And then you've got your other guys like Inez Cooper, Jalen Rivers, and there's even a chance that Zion Nelson can come back this year and make a contribution at left tackle. So you may not see it all this year because these kids, young kids, are in development, but they feel like they are going to be massively better on the O-line this year than they were last year, and that ultimately in 2024 and 2025 they will become elite on the offensive line. Defensive side of the ball, let's be honest, they need some guys to step up. Leonard Taylor can't be a 1 every 10 play guy. He's got to show up down after down. They're really counting on Branson Dean, the transfer from Purdue, to step up in training camp and claim the starting job next to Leonard Taylor. Jared Harrison Hunt, he'll be in the mix there. Several other guys will as well. But just way too much inconsistency from a lot of the guys at defensive tackle. So, yes, that is a work in progress. Defensive end's a little better. They've been stacking up at that position. Nigel Lee Kelly is the guy to watch there. He's the guy that has a chance to become elite, okay? Can he do it in year 2 this year, or is it going to take him to year 3 before he starts to show that type of ability? If he can show it by August, he will start, probably ahead of Jafari Harvey, I would think, because I think Messidor will be a starter at one defensive end position, but that's going to be a competition to watch in training camp. So they're getting better at end, still a work in progress at tackle. Linebacker, we know is a mess, okay? Francisco Maigoa is really, really good, okay? He's going to be one of the better interior linebackers in the country if he stays healthy. Apparently just a freak all over the practice field. They love him. But there's a problem. Who else is there? Who else is going to step up at linebacker position? Big question mark. You've been watching the coaches take transfer after transfer at the cornerback position. Who is going to cover? Who is going to get the big stop on third down in the fourth quarter in these games that are 50-50 coin flips? That's a variable for this team. Are the safeties as good as they're being advertised? Are they really the best safety tandem in the country? My personal opinion is that has not been shown yet on game day. Okay, we had this debate about anointing too quickly a week ago. We won't do it again today on this show. But we want them to be the best safety tandem in the country. If they are, that will help the defense, obviously, enormously. So to sum it up, the talent is getting better, but it is not there yet. And that means probably 8 wins. And if everything goes your way and you get a couple lucky bounces, maybe Azubi Charles is sitting here in 4 months saying, I am a genius. I hit it perfect. 9 wins, baby. But I think, and I set the number at 8 for the reasons that I stated, I think that they're going to be in win some, lose some mode in the bulk of these games. Texas A&M plus the games in the ACC, and win some, lose some to me equals an 8-win season. Go ahead, Matt. Now you can sit there and try to tear apart everything I just said.
No, listen, a lot of what you say makes sense. The only thing I'd add is when you're talking about individual players standing out, it's all about where the bar is set, right? They're evaluating these guys going against each other in the spring, and that's always my concern when you're looking at practice and things like that, which is what they're basing this on with new guys, is how they look against each other. And you can do the you can do the tangibles also. He runs a 4.4 straight ahead. He's 21 miles an hour, whatever. Like, those are great. But until you see them go against a guy who's bigger, faster, and stronger in a game, you don't know how they're going to respond. And that has been the problem in past years, because Mario Cristobal and his staff, I talked to those guys last year. They thought they were going to have a pretty good season because they were basing it on seeing how they were competing against each other in practices, and the bar for everybody they thought was higher than it was. So they thought everybody was up here when really everybody was down here together. And again, I've watched this movie before. We don't know where the bar is. Maybe the bar is at a Marvel Avengers level, or maybe it's at, E.T., which my kids won't watch because it's too old and too slow. And I do agree with you. I think the defense is a bigger question mark than the offense from Miami, which they haven't been able to get both of these sides of the ball playing great in the same year, which is super unfortunate. It wouldn't surprise me at all if this is a top 30 offense in the country and a bottom 40 defense in the country.
What happens if Leonard Taylor doesn't start showing up every play?
Right. We don't know.
The same pattern of Leonard.
That's why it's a question mark.
They're in big trouble.
And the only other thing I'd add is, about 42 minutes ago, you mentioned Mario's master plan and how you haven't seen it. Well, you know who has seen it, Gary? Me, okay? And in big red crayon, it said, don't listen to Stephen Wagner's predictions.
And then lose to Georgia Tech anyway. Sorry.
That's
all right. Well, so yeah, we've got that story on the website today. I hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll create a thread on the message board as well. We want to hear your guys' predictions on what you think is going to happen this season. So go ahead and post them in that thread, and we'll all compare notes here.
At me. At me. I know you're gonna have something to say. At me.
All right. So let's move on. We have other stuff on the website today. We take well, let me talk recruiting first. We finally got a hold of Kamarian Franklin. He was that last stray visitor from this past weekend that had not yet given us his review of the weekend. Well, we finally tracked him down yesterday afternoon, and that story is on the website. Stephen, you spoke to him. So now you could sum up the whole weekend in total. Tell us about Kamarian, your thoughts, and what grade would you give the first visit weekend of the cycle?
Collectively, I would probably grade the weekend in a pretty positive light. I think that Miami did make positive progress with everyone that they got to campus, which is obviously the end goal whenever you have these official visit weekends. However, it doesn't feel like anyone that they got to campus is really, like a sealed, firmed, shut, or, case shut, case closed, whatever you want to say, a 100% lock that I would put an RPM in for just right now. It felt to me like really some of the bigger guys that Miami's after right now, really, namely James Nesta and the 4-star linebacker from North Carolina and Kamarian Franklin. It really felt like those two guys are being kind of calculated in the way that, same with Wyatt Gilmore, they're being really calculated in the way that, they go through these official visits, and they're kind of being careful not to get too high on one school and completely overlook another school that they're considering. For Kamarian Franklin, that would mean Tennessee. For James Nesta, that would mean North Carolina and Oklahoma. For Wyatt Gilmore, that would mean Oklahoma and Minnesota and Kansas State and whatever the other school is that's in his top 5, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Would I say it was a good weekend? Yeah. Would I say it was a great weekend? Probably not. Because, it really didn't seem like, we had anyone come out and say, "Oh my God, this is so great. I'm ready to commit right now." Which
shut everything down, right?
Which in a perfect world is what these coaches want on an official visit. They want Dylan Stewart, the #1 player in the country, to say, "Oh my God, Miami is so incredible. I love it here. I'm committing and I'm shutting down my recruitment." And that didn't happen.
What Kwan Lacey did, right? Did he commit to after he canceled his Miami visit? Did he commit to somebody, or did he just say he was leaning toward? I thought it was Ole Miss or something. Maybe I
believe he's leaning toward Ole Miss. Okay. Don't believe he's committed. Raji Dennis did commit to Ole Miss though, and I do know that he was a guy who Miami kind of had their eye on, or at least Sam Spiegelman was reporting that Miami had their eye on him a little bit. He did commit to the Rebels, but. Yeah, in order for me to give this weekend an A or an A plus, I think it would have had to result in direct commitments.
Yeah. But maybe commitments, Stephen, aren't a reality so much in most cases the first week of June, because these kids still do have several visits to take here in the next 3 weeks.
No, that's very true, but we can't also act like
an A, right?
Yeah. I mean, that is what these coaches want. They understand that it's probably not reality, but that is, what they're really shooting for here. I don't think I would give it an A or an A plus. I would probably end up giving it a B, because I think Miami is in position to potentially land commitments and give themselves a good shot with some of these guys. I think they'll have a shot with Kamarian Franklin. I think they'll have a very good shot with James Nesta already being in his top 5. Draylon Miller is down to Miami and USC. Wyatt Gilmore, he's still going to take 4 more official visits this spring, but it seems like Miami feels good about the position that they're in with him. And Jere Hawkins, he's still going to go to he's still going to go to Florida, and he's still going to go to Penn State. But I think that Miami has a very reasonable and a very real shot with all of these guys. For Kamarian Franklin and Wyatt Gilmore, you can thank Jason Taylor and Joe Salavea and Mario Cristobal. for that one. For Jere Hawkins, I mean, chalk that up to Kevin Beard. For James Nesta, chalk that up to Mario Cristobal and Derek Nicholson. So I think Miami and Draylon Miller, obviously Kevin Beard too. So I think Miami does have a shot here. I don't really feel like any one recruit is overwhelmingly leaning right hard firmly in Miami's direction at this moment, because these guys do have other schools that they're still deciding between. But I definitely don't feel bad about it.
All right. Also on the recruiting front, we catch up with Fort Lauderdale Monarch High wide receiver Jabari Brady. He's a 2020. What the heck was that? He's a 2026 prospect who is going to be one of the top receivers in South Florida in his class. He's really one of the best right now, regardless of class. So we've got an update on him. He is being recruited by the entire Canes coaching staff. So check out that update. On the football front, we continue to count down the top 50 post-spring players on the roster. Today, we're at number 17, Francis Mayagoa. Yep, the true freshman offensive tackle. He made the top 20 because he's a starter without question, and that means he's in the top 20. So we break down his game today. And then on a final note, we also take a closer look at the baseball team coming off yet another disappointing finish to the season, knocked out at home in the regional. What do they have coming back? We take a look at that. And Matt, you worked on that story. Give us a synopsis of where you think this baseball program is moving forward from here.
Yeah, I mean, Yo-Yo and Walters are, obviously not coming back. And I think, Gino even said as much to the team after the game. But with the other guys, it just depends. I have a feeling it seems like most of the time now the juniors wind up leaving. You don't see seniors really on these teams that are drafted, So they could certainly lose quite a bit, honestly, of talent. Some of the guys who are eligible to leave, along with those two, CJ Kafis, Zach Levinson, even Rosario, believe it or not, after his horrible season, he has such good stuff. He's rated to go between 155 and 218 in the draft, depending on which site you look at. Dom Patelli, Carlos Perez, even with his not great year, batting 219, is projected to go in the draft. So the guys who you think are certainly going to be coming back just because they're not going to be really drafted is Jacoby Long, started, I think, 10 games, Ronaldo Gallo, Ben Chestnut. And then obviously the guys who aren't juniors will be back also. And Blake Sear is a big one, and Gardo Villegas is also a big one. So it's nice to have those guys back. And then the pitching is actually probably the best part of what's coming back with Carson Ligon, Gage Zeal, and the reliever Chris Cinta will all be back. So that's a good base point. They have a bunch of commitments / signees that we talk about in the story that'll help out depending where they're drafted. Some of those top guys might not be here either. And then you have the transfer portal. So I mean, it's almost like throwing darts, but we really wanted after the season ended to give you guys an idea of who can leave, right? Because juniors can leave. If you're a freshman or sophomore, you can't leave. So we're giving you an idea that really there's a lot of guys, almost the entire lineup, that can leave. And that is likely at least 5 or 6 of them to leave. Pitching staff, you have a couple of starters back, which is great. You're going to lose your closer. So they have work to do there. So we just sort of give you a big picture view. But the season was really, the end of the season was just so disappointing. And they always say to play your best baseball at the end. Well, guess what? Miami was playing its best baseball at the end. They were 113 of 16 entering regionals, and then Azubi cursed them, and they lost at regionals, right? Azubi, you were covering every game, and all of a sudden they couldn't play anymore. So I don't know what happened. They came home. You were in the press box. They were trying to impress you, I guess, and that was the end of it.
Yep. I think they just met the Longhorns. That's what put an end to it.
I don't know if you guys remember on the show, but when I covered the regional announcement, I don't know if you remember this, people watching, but I said how obviously Miami wasn't happy. And I was like, no, when they were number 9 instead of number 8, where they hoped to be number 8 national seed. And then when Texas, they were all excited, whatever, when their bracket was announced. Then all of a sudden Texas is announced, and it's just dead silence in the room. Dead silence in the room. And now in retrospect, you think they lost the game right there. I mean, they were, I don't think intimidated is the word, but I think they were upset. They were felt like that was a team that was really good that probably they shouldn't have had to host. It's a really good hitting team, very similar to Miami, a couple of really good pitchers and just a home run hitting team. And they were just too much for Miami to handle.
Yeah, you're not supposed to have any respect for anybody that comes from Texas.
Yeah, I mean, the Miami football team would be yelling about, we're going to kick their butts or whatever. The baseball team it was dead silence in that. And literally I was in the locker room with the team. And when the announcers showed Texas on the screen, they were chattering, the players were chattering with each other at the time. It was just dead silence. So that was probably
Maybe too much respect.
In retrospect, yeah. I mean, look, they're going to beat Texas, and I wouldn't be mentioning it. But now that they lost, it strikes me as an interesting moment.
All right, parting thought for Matt and Zuby, since you guys were covering baseball here the last several weeks. Does Gino DiMare keep his job? Zuby.
I think he keeps his job. I mean, I really can't see them firing him. I saw something about his recruiting classes next year as being 1 and 2, and obviously the family connection there and all that stuff combined. I don't see him or Miami departing ways with Gino right now.
Matt Shodell.
It's really up to Radakovich because he's not a guy who really seems to like to fire coaches. But if he wants to make the Miami fan base happy and put his first real imprint on this team instead of handing out extensions to Katie Meyer and Jim Larinaga and whatever coach wants to stay here forever, this is his moment to say, you know what? Not making regionals for 7 straight years, not making super regionals for 7 straight years is not good enough. We need to change. I don't think Radakovich will do it, so I think he'll be back.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't have an opinion on this one. I'm going to sit this one out. But the thing we don't know is if Radakovich has a hand-picked guy that he would want to give that job to. If he doesn't, I agree with the Zuby. I think he keeps it for another year.
A hand-picked guy. What are you talking? What alternate reality is? It's Miami baseball. They can find a top coach.
Yeah, I agree.
Not what they did last time, which was take a guy who was an assistant coach with a great last name and make him the head coach. They could find a great national name, and he would be the next coach of Miami quite happily. Believe me, it would not be a problem.
I agree. I think we're probably a year away from that maybe being an issue. I don't know.
That's fair. Because look, the team they were 6th last year, 9th this year. I mean, they were top 10. It didn't work out at the end. I played baseball for years. Sometimes things just don't go your way in a certain game, and they had to play 3 games.
That must have been a thrill to watch Matt playing baseball.
Hey, I was a pitcher. And a center fielder. I went from being a submarine pitcher in 7th grade to throwing overhands. So that was quite the transition.
I'd rather watch a Zuby play football. How about that?
Yeah, I believe you. But anyway, the point is sometimes baseball games just go wrong. And
I'd rather watch Steven play cricket.
Steven doesn't play cricket. Unless it's the board game. Which you guys probably don't even know what that is. Darts. But anyway, so look, they had one bad game against Texas, and then they wound up having to play 3 games in 24 hours. I said before the regionals that the starting pitching is going to be a big problem for this team. It was. And things just didn't go their way. So if I'm the AD, I know fans aren't a fan of this. I am giving them another year because they were top 10 both years at the end of the regular season. And sometimes the game just doesn't go your way. You got to give them another year. But I agree with Gary too. If next year you still haven't made super regionals since 2016, Zuby's going to put the hammer down, and that's the end of it.
Adios, Gino.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there will come a point where you got to say, okay, let's try something different. I would think. I mean, baseball is supposed to be the 3rd most important sport at Miami. It used to be the 2nd. I think basketball is kind of trumped it a little bit at this point. But it's supposed to be the 3rd most important sport. So we'll see what happens there. All right, that's going to do it for this morning for Good Morning CaneSport. We thank you guys so much for making us part of your morning and putting up with Matt. If you like this show, like our YouTube channel, please hit your subscribe button, hit your like button. It helps us with the algorithms at YouTube. I know I should probably say this at the beginning of the show, but I never think about it till the end of the show, so I hope everybody is still listening. If you're not yet a subscriber to CaneSport.com, please head on over to the website, join our community. The football season's coming up. We are in the heat of recruiting. There's so much for you to read and sink your teeth into. and we love trying to make your fan experience better every single day. So for Matt Shodell, Zuby Charles, Stephen Wagner, I'm Gary Ferman. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.